Almost. Major. Holy fucking shit, this is major!
So I feel like for some people, Jim Jarmusch is a super foundational filmmaker. I have friends in college who absolutely like love this guy. He's like kind of like very informative for like their tastes, or very formative for their taste in film. I'm curious to know for all of you what your gateway to Jim Jarmusch was. Like, what was the first film of his that you saw?
I guess Coffee and Cigarettes feels like the answer that I would have. I remember seeing Broken Flowers in the theater at my local, like, not so local art house theater where I grew up, and not loving it, but being perplexed by it, which when you're younger, it's almost better than loving it because you're left pondering it or whatever. It's actually, that's a movie I have not rewatched, which I always want. I got to rewatch it because maybe I'll love it, on a second watch. But I feel like Coffee and Cigarettes, Broken Flowers, kind of early 2000s Jarmusch was where I was like, oh, who's this guy? And then I obviously went back and watched the majority of his filmography. I mean, Dead Man 2, I guess, was really early, but I definitely caught that after Coffee and Cigarettes. But Dead Man's like a masterpiece. So,
what's your favorite Jarmusch?
I guess I'd have to look at my letterbox, but I mean, like, Dead Man's up there. I know I'm sure I'm forgetting like the obvious. I do love Coffee and Cigarettes, which I know, I mean, it's an anthology film, which I guess is kind of, I don't know. I mean, I suppose a little reductive. That's maybe not the right word, but
it counts. It's
yeah. I feel like his anthology films aren't as appreciated as much. I mean, I love Night on Earth, and I feel like a lot of people would consider that lower tier Jarmusch. So.
That's. I think that was the first one I saw, and I loved it so much. And then the thing is, right after that, I was like, oh, I gotta watch Stranger Than Paradise, and I was like not big on it. And then a few months later, I was just like, I kind of want to rewatch it. And now it's like one of my favorites of all time. But yeah, I started with Not on Earth, and I've seen all of his narrative films. I just haven't seen the Stooges documentary.
Right. Gimme Danger, right?
Yeah.
My favorite one, and this is right, actually, Only Lovers Left Alive, which I know a lot of people love. That one, I loved it when I saw it, and is the best movie the best movie of his that I've seen. And there's a few I haven't seen, but I've seen a lot, and I love that movie.
I would agree with you. That's probably my favorite too, and it's one of my favorite films of the past decade. I mean,
yeah, that's great.
It's such a beautiful love story, and also just like I love how just certain scenes where, and we'll get into this with Ghost Dog, but like when Tilda Swinton goes packing to see Tom Hiddleston, she only packs books. Like Jarmusch is just such right. He loves culture and loves learning so much about other cultures on top of that, and I feel like Only Lovers Left Alive is like just all about, and obviously this applies to Ghost Dog too, but about how culture and all of the small things that we kind of take for granted keep us alive and keep us going on. I guess for my first, I remember my parents got me, I think it was my dad got me Down by Law for Christmas, and I'd never even heard of it, but I was getting into the Criterion Collection, and he was like, oh, you'll love this movie, it's great. And then he realized when we were watching it, oh, I don't think I've actually seen this, so I think he confused it with Stranger Than Paradise. But we were still like, yeah, this is amazing. Like, it's just, it's so gorgeous. And yeah, it really did challenge me in terms of like opening my eyes to American independent film that wasn't plot driven, that was entirely based on mood and vibe, and just, yeah, as I mentioned before, the small intricacies of life that are just so, that we don't even acknowledge, that can just make us are just so meaningful that I mean, I love Patterson for that reason too, which, I can imagine people being like, there's no plot, he just drives a bus and writes poetry, but it's like, it's all about the little moments. And I feel like even in something like Ghost Dog, which I'd say is his most accessible and most like genre, I mean, he bends genres all the time, but I feel like even in something like Ghost Dog, which is very much his, Les Samurai or Branded to Kill or The Killer, it's like even in those small, we'll get into it, but it is, I love how much he loves culture. And I think that he's an important independent American filmmaker because he might be American, but he's in love with the world. And
Bryden, what about you? You started with the Dead Don't Die ride, and that's your favorite, right?
oh, I'm sorry. That's the only one of his I've seen that I've disliked.
Yeah, it's not good, but
Yeah, I'm not as big on that one. My first one was actually Ghost Dog. I think I'd heard about it when I was in high school. I don't know. Maybe I was reading Roger Ebert's reviews at the time, and I think maybe I read his review of it. And I don't know. I was like just curious at the idea of like the movie's called Ghost Dog. What an interesting title for a movie. That's like probably how my 14-year-old brain was operating at the time. And then I don't know. I listened to the first Wu-Tang album when I was, I think, in my senior year of high school, and then that maybe prompted me to get it at like, I think I got it at like a bargain bin store. I can't remember, but yeah, I watched it on like a little DVD player I had in my room, and I remember liking it, but I mean, I think I wrote down some thoughts on it like when I was in high school, but like it's on like some laptop that like doesn't work anymore. I think I liked the thing I remember most was like the sort of the gentleness of Forrest Whitaker's performance, which I remember being kind of like thrown off by. Like the moment like that I remembered was when he's like about to execute the hit with like the sniper rifle, and then the bird like lands next to him, and like sort of like a little smile flickers across his face, like just sort of like those moments of humanity that sort of like break the stoicism. Like those are sort of like the emotional ends to the performance that I really was struck by. And I also loved all the jokes involving how shitty the mob was, like the kid throwing the toys down at them from like the apartment building and just like swearing at them. That was like just so funny, showing how the mob was so pathetic.
And it's funny, you know, the mob thing on the rewatch, it had me laughing because, you know, when I watched it, I was younger and I think I liked it, but I didn't really get it. Like you're saying, you know, Charlie, it's like, yeah, it's the little things are so important. And you got to remember, like the movie's made in 99. This is when the mob has become a joke, right? So like for people who don't know, like Gotti, you know, John Travolta jokes aside, the whole downfall of Gotti was really the downfall of like the Casa Nostra, kind of, right? Like obviously in New York and Jersey, I suppose, like The Sopranos kind of reflects that to some degree, right? Like the opening episode or one of the opening episodes, right? Tony is lamenting being born too late, right? That's like a very real, and this movie comes out right as The Sopranos is about to explode. And it's all that was real. It was like, oh, they're a joke now. You know what I mean? Like, and
like analyze this.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, to watch it and you have like Henry Silva and these guys, just like Victor Argo. And, you know, the thing I forgot is Victor Argo is so, you know, he's such an intense actor. And I forgot, like, this is like, he's going to be gone in like 4 years when this movie comes out.
Right.
And it's like a very funny performance, which is like, if you watch Victor Argo in like Abel Ferrara movies, he's like so crazy and like intense. And then to watch him in this one, which I had obviously totally forgotten, it's adorable. Like he's like chasing the bird and he like is getting the kid is throwing the toys at him, and it's like lovely. It's so funny. It's like that whole part it was so delightful and very, very Jarmusch, right? Like that's so beautiful and specific, and like, you know, they shot the movie in Jersey City. I lived in New York forever, and like if you know Jersey City, it's a Jersey City movie. It's like transient metro. There is a culture, but it's kind of in the shadows, right? This is 20 years ago, so kind of the gentrification that has changed it maybe isn't quite there yet. Yeah, a lot of good stuff. And I definitely liked it quite a bit more on the rewatch, I will say. And yeah, it's, you know, the other part of it is like existential hitman movies I love, right? I think I can say that. Like, I love The American with Clooney, The Samurai's, you know, obviously a banger. And this one, I mean, those are the three that I think of. The Killer, obviously, you mentioned. But like, there's something so lovely about the directness of the job to the, you know, the thoughtfulness. And it really comes through. Yeah, anyway, very good.
Welcome to Almost Major, where we discuss the many major studios and the films they released. My name is Kevin Tudor. Here with me is Bryden Doyle. Say hi.
Hello.
Charlie Nash.
Hey.
And we have our very first guest, and I wanted him to be our first guest because of his podcast, The B-Side, and because of another podcast like It's 1999, it really got me interested in movies that are not the big ones, and also just made me also want to make this podcast. So I had to have him on. It's Dan Mecca from the Film Stage.
Yo, this is great. Yeah, I feel like when you said you were doing this on Twitter, I was like, oh my God, I was so excited because these are exactly the movies that I, as you know, from the B-Side, it's like, these are the movies where it's like, what about those movies? Like Artisan films, and it's just so exciting to dig into them. So yeah, it's so cool you guys are doing this. I'm honored to be the first guest, and excited to talk about these two movies because they're so representative of like the time and like the type of movie. These movies could never get made now, which we'll talk about, but anyway.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of just the thing of like growing up and being a real movie store kid and
right.
Just renting movies that I grew up and just have no footprint in movie history, and it's just great to kind of talk about them. And most of these are going to be fairly older movies, at least 20 years old and whatnot, but it's just like I have an idea, I remember a trailer or something like that, but it's just like not to sound too old manish, but they really don't make them like this anymore. But and also it spawned from hearing that you worked at Killer Films, and I was just like, man, I wish there was just like a mini series of like Killer Films and Film District, Artisan, stuff like that, where it's just like talk about the movies that even like don't talk about them because they have a big name in them, talk about them because they like had a moment within this big company, and then eventually, maybe the company got bought or whatever, but it's always an interesting story.
Yeah, and Killer, right, and I mentioned this whenever I did on the podcast, Killer is an example of surviving, right, because they almost didn't, right? I think they were in a moment where they were at a crosshairs. I don't think I'm speaking at a school saying that. And, I think it was the Mildred Pierce show that got him through. I think, I could be wrong, but like from my knowledge, that period of time, it was touch and go, and I think they kind of made it through to the other side. And obviously Haynes, who, Haynes and Christine Vachon came up together and are still make everything together. And he's still there. So yeah, it's interesting. Cause yeah, Artisan, it goes, Lionsgate buys it and Film District goes away. And, the mid-majors aren't even like really a thing anymore. Not really, like a little, but like really that this whole podcast is it's a relic. It's interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Do you have any, just to intro you and whatnot, do you have any initial memories of Artisan, or what do you think of when you think of Artisan?
I think of Belly. Probably.
Yeah. Hell
first,
Yeah.
Which, have you guys talked about Belly yet?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, because I think when we were talking, Kevin, I saw Belly on the list, and I was kind of like, oh, well, Belly rules. So I would like to talk about Belly, but then I saw Panic, and I was like, well, I love Panic.
Who else?
So I have to, like, who even knows about Panic? Like, so I kind of had to be like, and I wanted to rewatch Ghost Dog. But Belly, like, my God, like, what a movie. I saw it when I was younger. I'm sure I didn't like it because I just was like, what is happening? But, I rewatched it recently, and it's basically great. Like, it's like Hype Williams, who's, you could make the argument the greatest music video director of all time. Like,
probably.
And he kind of, I think he just kind of was like, did Belly and was like, no thanks, right? Like, I think kind of after that, in terms of feature films, which happens. I mean, it happens.
Yeah.
I didn't see it until recently, when after DMX had passed, and I was like, this is fucking great. And then I, of course, go to Rotten Tomatoes, where it's got like a 19% or whatever. And I'm like looking at these reviews, and I'm like, oh, it was all white people back in like 1998. Like,
and I was gonna say, Artisan, so you were talking about Ghost Dog and in the context of the time, Ghost Dog and Belly and these movies, like I could name you, I mean, they're not all Artisan movies, but like, Paid in Full, In Too Deep, right? Like, there's like another Mackay Pfeiffer movie.
Artisan put out Hot Boys, which has Snoop Dogg and Master P, but that was direct to video. But
like, like another one is Bones.
Yes, hell yes,
which is a horror movie, but like late '90s, early aughts, like this hip hop cinema thing is happening at a higher level, not like a major studio level, but a mid-major level, and these are like not bad movies. Like, but they got bad reviews, Charlie, like you're saying, because it's like, R.I.P. Roger Ebert, God bless, and he was probably more friendly than most of the critics, but like, because it's all Roger Ebert and like Rex Reed, or, they're watching these movies and they're just like, what is this? Like, why is the contrast so intense? And it's like, relax, relax, old timer. Like, it's like, and then you go back and you watch, in this age of, and we don't need it, whatever. Like in this age of big movies are lit and colored to appease a streaming palette, which is to say there's an evenness and an indirect blandness to many of the larger films that come out quite literally because they're trying to make sure you can see them as clear as you can on your phone, which is what it is. You go back to Belly and you're like, if you watch Belly on your phone, you would be like, and you can, I'm sure you can, but you would just be like, is my phone broken? Like, what's going on? Like, and it's lovely. It's a lovely thing to return to for sure.
Yeah. It's also just so such a proudly, like it takes, it says, I mean, I know we're here to talk about Ghost Dog, but I loved how Belly was just so rooted in Black culture and was taking Black cultural influence into the filmmaking. It did not play by the rules in any way for, straight white audiences. And I think that was very, and as you said, Dan, people are like, well, what am I supposed to do with this? And it's like, I don't know, empathize with like what they're trying to do. Like it's technically stunning in so many ways, and it is a deeply empathetic film. And I think that people just weren't wanting to engage with the text, and instead were just kind of like, I don't know, like it is the type of thing. I will say, going back to Ghost Dog, what I was struck by this time around is I genuinely think you couldn't make this film today, I guess, but it does feel so timely and contemporary at the same time. Like, sure. If that makes any sense. Like, I mean, nobody's really using cell phones. Nobody's really using phones of any kind. They're using carrier pigeons, as a matter of fact. I feel like you could make this film today and it would still be just as important and impactful. And at the same time, you're right. It is very much a product of the 90s where, the mob was a joke. But I feel like we're still getting movies about that right now. I mean, not exactly a mob movie, but House of Gucci's kind of doing the same thing with, aren't these people fucking cartoons? Like,
I mean, yeah. And then once you get into Irishman, where it's just, it's a lot more bleak nowadays. But let me set up the movie that we're talking about. We're talking about Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai, which is technically a 1999 movie because it premiered at Cannes in May 1999, at TIFF September 1999, but it screened or started showing in the US March 3rd, 2000. At maximum, it was at 109 theaters. The budget was $2 million. Opening weekend, it got $166,000 on 14 theaters. The total gross domestic was $3.3 million, and worldwide was $10.6. It's written and directed by Jim Jarmusch, who prior to this made Dead Man in 1995. He did a couple of Neil Young music videos that concluded in a concert film in 97. Stars Forrest Whitaker as Ghost Dog. Prior to this, he was in Phenomenon in 1996.
Hell yeah.
And Body Count in 1998. Henry Silva as Ray Vargo, his last role, besides a short role in Ocean's 11 in 2001. Prior to this, he was in Above the Law in 1988, Manchurian Candidate 62, and just for fun, Sharky's Machine in 1981.
Oh, good movie.
Yeah. John Torme as Louis. Prior to this, he was in bit roles in movies like The Real Blonde, where he plays a man named titled as Harassing Man, and he played a deli clerk in Jungle to Jungle. So
We all remember that. That turn. We all remember that turn from Jungle to Jungle. A movie I think I've seen it 47 times because we own that
Probably.
VHS Jungle to Jungle. I think I watched it a million times. Yeah.
I watched it a million times. I remember nothing of it whatsoever.
I remember the kid's name's Mimi Siku. I remember that. I will die. I will be on my deathbed. My son will be like, what can you tell me before you go? And I'm just going to say Mimi Siku and then pass. And he'll be like, this is...
That's your
what a waste.
rosebud.
Yeah, why did he say that? Mimi Siku?
Some quick trivia. Jarmusch wrote Ghost Dog for Forrest Whitaker and said if he didn't take the role, he probably wouldn't have made the movie, which I always wonder if directors really mean that or not. I feel like
like a Jarmusch does, probably.
Yeah. It's like once you put probably a year plus into a script, you're like, oh, I'm going to make this fucking movie. I mean, I'm sad about this, but, the character of Nobody is played by Gary Farmer, who also played a character named Nobody in Dead Man. He has the same line in both movies, which is stupid fucking white man. And also in Smoke Signals 1998, Victor's father asks Gary Farmer's character who his favorite native is, and he replies nobody. So and also, of course, this is RZA's first score. So we're all thankful.
Which is a big deal at the time.
Yes.
Big deal at the time.
What a score it is.
Great cameo. I forgot about the cameo. Love the cameo.
Yeah.
Just slow-mo walk into Ghost Dog for 3 minutes. I'm yes!
Dan, I work at the Coolidge Corner Theater in Brookline, Massachusetts, and we had RZA come to do an original score for the 36th Chambers live.
What?
Awesome.
Yep.
When was this?
This was right before. It was in the before times. It was summer of 2019.
Oh god.
And he just walked across the lobby, and I couldn't bring myself to say anything. I was like, I don't know what I'm I have a million things I could ask you, but I'm just afraid it would be coming off as oh my god, you're RZA, and have him be like, haha, it is me, type of thing.
You don't want to shout Wu-Tang at him?
Yeah, I could do the W, of course, but
yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, wow. RZA's. Yeah, I mean, RZA's he's great in Coffee and Cigarettes, right? He's a very good actor, right? After this, he's in things and great. He's great in that movie Due Date. I don't know if you guys saw Due Date with RDJ and Zach Galifianakis. Kind of an underrated movie, I actually think. It's a pretty fun movie.
I forgot he was in that. Okay.
And he has one scene. He's like the TSA agent, and it's just a funny scene. He's just funny. He's a good actor. It's just he's very charming.
Yeah. He's funny and funny people. Yeah.
Funny people, right? Of course.
Yeah. Do you have any quick notes or trivia, Bryden, from Jim Jarmusch around this time?
Yeah, he really wanted Forrest Whitaker to make the movie, as you said. He said there was something about it that embodies something contradictory in a way, and that kind of gentle quality that he has. He can be a big, threatening, intimidating character, and they just talked a bunch to get the character down. And talking about the studio aspect of it, Jarmusch says that a studio film would see the scene where they're watching the boat being built. So, he said they would see that as wasting time because it doesn't advance the plot. So
sure.
Artisan comes in. Yeah, RZA, he wanted to do the score, and RZA says that was coincidental because he wanted to. That was actually around the time he wanted to break into doing film scores. There's a whole special feature on the Criterion Channel about where RZA talks about the influences of the stuff that he's making, how he's using flutes and some other thing glass bowls to give the score a really unique sound.
Right.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, and I'm sure we don't have numbers on this. I guarantee you, Ghost Dog made a bundle on DVD.
Oh,
right.
Of course.
Which you have to remember back then. That's how a company like Artisan keeps going, right? Because it does okay, in theaters, right? It makes whatever you said, Kevin, right? Like
10 worldwide on a $2 million budget.
So you're not making anything on that, right? Theaters get half. Your advertising is at least 2, right? So you're not making money, but you're not losing money. Maybe not. So all your money is DVD, which was real. I mean, in 2000, 2001, that's a real avenue. So I guarantee you. And I think I can say with more certainty that's how Belly kind of, not to bring it back to Belly, but I mean that movie for sure
Absolutely.
was a classic, in the world of like grocery store DVD sales, whatever, Blockbuster. Anyway, that's just like such an important thing to kind of, sadly, it doesn't really exist anymore,
Yeah, in one of my favorite books about movies called The Big Picture that came out a few years ago, it was talking about a statistic where it was talking about the boom of DVD and how whenever DVD started to fail, Sony was like, where the fuck do we make money? But a statistic was that I think it was 40% of all DVDs bought in the boom were just never opened. It was just people bought them so much
to buy them.
Yeah.
That was The Big Picture. Is the guy who you just went through the Sony hacks emails and he wrote the book.
Yeah, it was fucking great.
I always thought that was the funniest. I mean, good for him. I remember listening to an interview with that guy on a podcast, and I was like, so you just went through all that stolen shit and wrote a book. I mean, I guess cool. I don't know.
I mean, he intros it where he's like, I had a conundrum. Will I do it? I was like, you wanted to do it. You didn't have no conundrum or anything like that. You wanted to do it, and God bless you.
My favorite email I read, I didn't read many to be honest, but my favorite things was all the way Amy Pascal wrote emails. Just a highlight. If you guys have, I don't know if anybody's worked in production and just the etiquette of emails and it's just a whole nother world. She's so direct. It's if I were to getting emails from her, it would take me 6 months to deal with that whole energy coming from her. It's so at your neck. You're oh my Amy, stop hitting me. And then George Clooney's apology to her and all of Sony about the Monuments Men. It's George.
Yeah.
Apology not accepted. Have you seen the Monuments Men? No. But it's a lovely, you're oh, George, you feel so bad about the Monuments Men. It's very sad.
Yeah, the email I remember is, it was some associate that was just can you guys email Rooney Mara? She keeps asking about the Dragon Tattoo sequel. Can you tell her it's not going to happen? I was that's so heartbreaking that she was just hey guys, is that going to happen? I'm yeah, I feel the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go through, like I said, there's not much plot here. It's a Jarmusch movie, but there is some things to go over here.
We got a really big problem here, Louis. Seems like you're directly responsible for it. What we need to do is eliminate the scumbag who whacked Frank. His killer needs to be neutralized.
In the words of the ancients, matters of great concern should be treated lightly. Matters of small concern should be treated seriously.
Louis, now is the time to tell us everything you know about this mysterious weirdo.
Ghost dog, power equality. Always see everything, my brother.
He calls himself Ghost Dog. What? Ghost Dog. Ghost Dog? He said Ghost Dog.
Ghost Dog sees himself as a retainer of Louis, a local mobster who saved Ghost Dog's life years earlier. When living as a hitman for the American Mafia, he adheres to a code of the samurai and interprets and applies the wisdom of the Hagakure.
Maybe Hagakure, but yeah,
Yeah, I was going to say
You're there.
Yeah. Louis tells Ghost Dog to kill the gangster Handsome Frank, who's sleeping with the daughter of local mafia boss Virgo. Ghost Dog arrives and kills the gangster before the scene the girl is also in the room. He leaves her alive. And this is where the Rashomon thing comes in, which I kind of felt like he was hitting it a bit too hard, but I get it. He's really into books and whatnot, so I really liked that. But
Did anybody else notice the real estate sign at the house when he's making the first hit? It's Alighieri Real Estate, which obviously Dante Alighieri.
Okay, I did not catch that.
Wink, guys, fucking hell, purgatory, whatever.
The only thing I noticed is that a club was called Liquid Sword, and I was like, nice.
I also do like that the fact that a lot of these Hitman movies, it's usually the hitman makes a mistake and is then punished for it, and here it's the people who hired him made a mistake. They thought that the daughter wasn't going to be there, and he did follow the code, and now is paying the price for their mistake, which is fucked up.
Yeah.
Well, look, what's cool about the movie, right? When I was in high school, partly because of Ghost Dog, but I'm just being honest, but probably more directly.
You were in high school because of Ghost Dog?
Yeah, well,
Yes.
he was my. Well, let me be clear. He was my civics teacher, so Mr. Oh, we're like, Mr. Ghost Dog, can I go to the bathroom? And he would be like, only if you feel your soul will, or whatever. No, so a little bit because of Ghost Dog, but probably more because of The Last Samurai, starring Tom Cruise and Ken Watanabe. I did for a period get really into the Code of Bushido, not like doing it or anything, but reading it. Like I became very interested in just like the practices, and I would just read it and what have you. And so going back, and you know how obviously the movie is, you know, chaptered out basically with these passages from Hagakure where it's like they kind of drive the narrative and this idea of even if everyone else has forgotten honor, will you be the one who remembers it? And then at the end, him being like, you know, sometimes it has to be the ancient ways, ultimately getting to, you know, I won't spoil it, but like the end of the film. So like all of that's so disciplined, right? Like, and that's also Jarmusch. Like, so for as vibey and, you know, day in the life as he can be, there's such a discipline to his filmmaking, right? Which I think sometimes gets overlooked, where it's like Ghost Dog, it is the title of the movie. Like there's no shying from that, right? It's this guy in his code, and there's never really a blip, right? You know, like you said, the mistakes are not his, you know.
It is funny you mentioned that too, because you're right. I do feel like some people think like oh, he's just vibing, or he's just kind of like improvising, but you're right. It's a really hard balance to strike a film that is relaxed and just kind of reveling in just this mood or this type of philosophy, and which is many of his films are all about, and also come off as calculated. And what I love is that he is one of the few filmmakers who can make a film that feels so relaxed, but you know every choice is deliberate without it even being that showy. Even though there are like showy moments in this film, it never feels like it's pushing the envelope into stylized aesthetics that have no purpose. Like they all serve a purpose for visualizing what this character's mindset is and what he's going through, and on top of it being fucking cool, you know, like
it's pretty cool. Back to the plot. To avoid being implicated in the murder of a made man, Virgo and his associate Sonny decide to get rid of Ghost Dog. Louis knows practically nothing about Ghost Dog, as the hitman communicates only by homing pigeons. So just all the great scenes of all the hitman trying to deal with pigeons. It's a fun time.
When they have to write small, it's like they're writing on like a little piece of paper. It's like, I can't write this fucking small. The glasses. You know,
the old guy yelling passenger pigeons or whatever was like the best part of the movie, probably.
I know this is a completely different type of movie, but I couldn't help but think about like how the scene in Mulholland Drive where Justin Theroux's sitting in with like the board of filmmakers and stuff like that, and how ridiculous and sloppy and just loud and abrasive they are compared to Ghost Dog's very methodical, very existential, and very meditative mindset. Is like these people just don't think things through, and then they're just kind of like, well, we got to do this, and they're sloppy in a way that I think is interesting. That every white character in this film is so sloppy and so like, oh, whatever, we just got to roll with it, like, I guess. And every other character has this, they think things through, and they're passionate in what they do, and they're passionate about following a certain code or enlightening themselves and making themselves to be better and communicate with each other in ways that all of the white people do not. The white people are just kind of like, I mean, they're buffoons, basically. And like, I think that's something that especially struck me upon this viewing. So
totally.
Yeah, just seeing the mob as like three people at a table talking to Louis. One is like an old guy who can't even hear, and the other one's just referencing Public Enemy. And there's only one that's like the real type of mobster. It's like, we gotta take his fucking top back, man. Like, it's just so funny.
I think it's interesting, and we'll get into this scene later, that like one character actually is into hip hop, but is just into it on a superficial level without understanding.
Right, Flavor Flav, right?
Yeah, without even trying to comprehend what the song or the culture could be aiming at. He's just in it for because it's groovy or whatever. I don't know. I guess we shouldn't get into that scene yet, but yeah.
The mobsters start tracing all of the pigeons because they don't know where he lives, because he, only communicates through homing pigeons, and they don't even know his actual name or anything like that. They just know him as the mystical ghost dog. They start tracing all of the pigeons. They find his cabin on top of a building and kill all the pigeons. Ghost Dog then realizes he must kill Vargo and his men, or they will kill him and Louis, his master. During the day, Ghost Dog frequently visits the park to see his best friend, a French-speaking ice cream man named Raymond. And this is a part where Ice Cream by Wu-Tang is playing as Ghost Dog is eating ice cream, and I was a big fan of that. The little girl talks to Ghost Dog, asks him if he really has no friends and no one talks to him. He says his best friend is Raymond, even though he speaks French, and Ghost Dog only speaks English, so they don't understand each other, but nonetheless they have a connection. He befriends this little girl named Pearline, to whom he lends the book Rashomon.
You guys remember Pearline? She was in the Bernie Mac show.
Bernie Mac show, yeah.
Oh,
pretty good show. Pretty good show.
She's also very much like the Tilda Swinton character in Only Lovers Left Alive, in that she carries around, in this case, a lunchbox as opposed to a suitcase, but only books. No food, just only books.
Right.
And yeah, I think it's also important to point out that the two of the books they point are, at least Frankenstein is one of them, which
Sure.
I think is very, very interesting, because Louis saved Ghost Dog's life, and now he is kind of this, he reconstructed himself as, they never say it in the film, and I don't think it ever implies this, but many would say, well, if you reconstruct yourself as a man who kills people for a living, you're technically a monster. And what's great is that Ghost Dog is far more humane and empathetic and cultured and insightful than every other character here. So I think, much like how Frankenstein in the book is, obviously reassembled from human remains, is not just a monster. And the line of, I liked it so much better than the movie, I think is actually indicative as to what they're trying to get at with this character, who could be, if you throw the word out hitman, you automatically have an assumption of who he could be. And the film humanizes him in ways that I think are, as you used the word gentle earlier, Dan, and I would say, he's a gentle soul.
Couple things I really liked about those book the book scene. One, I love how Whitaker plays it, where he's so reserved initially when he's very cagey when he's talking to this girl, not quite looking at her. But then when she brings up the books, he's his voice kind of raises his eyebrows. He's like, I'd love to know about your books. And I love the one detail, one of the books that she has. First, she shows Wind in the Willows, and he is just oh yeah, I read that book. That was really good. But then she has a book, The Souls of Black Folk, and then I love how his voice kind of gets gravelly, and he's like, you got time with that one. It's sort of kind of knowing that's a heavy book and not wanting to kind of warning how that's a heavy thing to deal with.
Right.
And Rashomon too. It's funny you keep referring to how Louis saved Ghost Dog, because I feel that's when Louis first tells the story of how he met Ghost Dog, it's it's slightly different how they remember it. You see it's a bunch of white kids beating up Ghost Dog in an alley, and Louis steps out and says what's going on here? And then one of the guys turns and pulls his gun on Louis, and then Louis shoots him. But Ghost Dog remembers it as if he was just being saved by when he was being attacked and everything. That's the reason why those guys were shot. So it is Rashomon, I mean, about different recollections of one event is very, very, it's on the nose, but I think it's also very interesting how, Ghost Dog, his loyalty, it is so admirable, but then it's also built on a lie. It's kind of demystifying how the mobsters, they're not worthy of respect. They have no loyalty, and there's no there's nothing to respect. I thought that was really interesting.
And he initially thought they had loyalty. That's a great fact to point out, because you're right that he was raised on a lie, because he assumed that it was this sense of loyalty, and in fact he ended up learning more about loyalty and being a more loyal person than they ever will be.
Right, which brings it back to Frankenstein, right? Because obviously the whole point of Frankenstein is, who's the real monster, right? And then obviously, this movie, brings that all the way home, right? That's the whole crux of it. So I think, but I mean, right there is a great point. As casual as the movie feels, there's so many intricate, narrative references and inspirations and homages, and as on the nose as they can feel, it's not and I can't, of course, think of a garish example of an on the nose thing off the top of my head, but like, it never strikes the chord of like fallacy. You know what I mean? Like you're never like, all right, relax. Like you're never like doing. I never was doing that. Like there's certainly other movies you watch where you're like, slow down, guy. Like we get it. Like you're making a whatever movie. Like you're not. So.
We could say that the guy in House of the Dead who mentions the Romero trilogy and goes on and on about that. That would be a good example.
There you go.
There you go.
That's Artisan, right? Of course, you guys did it.
Yep.
Oh, that movie. Oh, House of the Dead.
I mean,
oh boy, yeah.
To go on to that, in the Criterion booklet, it reveals that
wait, the House of the Dead Criterion booklet.
Oh, I would buy that
I have
so
it,
fucking
right?
fast.
I would not be able to sleep at night if that wasn't a part of my library. No,
you get an arcade game of it with the purchase. You get the House of the Dead.
I'm gonna tweet out. I'm gonna make a Criterion cover for House of the Dead and tweet that out. So.
Please.
On that note, though, I do love that in the Criterion booklet. I'm gonna quote. This is from the piece by Jonathan Rosenbaum. Jarmusch made a point of showing Ghost Dog to the once prolific, then unemployed 77-year-old B film maestro Seijun Suzuki, who responded, "I see you've taken some things from me. And when I make my next film, I'm going to take some things from you."
That's
and Rosenbaum writes, "I'm still trying to figure out exactly how this promise was carried out in Suzuki's splendidly extravagant and immensely pleasurable Pistol Opera, a film I will admit I have not seen." But he writes, "A belated sequel of sorts to Branded to Kill, but the diverse uses of a wise girl and an American character named Dr. Painless are particularly suggestive of an exchange between these two prescient global filmmakers who, like Ghost Dog and Raymond, didn't speak a word of each other's language." So I think that's interesting.
That's one of my favorite stories about that type of thing is I think it was when when Fistful of Dollars came out and they were like, yo, Kurosawa, like he just like made Yojimbo. What do you have to say about that? Like, were you mad? And Kurosawa, this is obviously apocryphal, or I'm being general here, but it's basically like they're like, yo, Kurosawa, what's up? What do you think about this friggin' Western? And he's like, yeah, they ripped me off, but I ripped off Red Harvest. So what do you want to tell you? Which is, if you ever read the Dashiell Hammett book, Red Harvest, it's literally Yojimbo, right? It's like, the Glass Key, Red Harvest, like, is just Yojimbo, and then it's like, whatnot. So I love stuff like that, where it's like, you steal from me, I'll steal from you. Let's keep going. Love it.
You could argue the best artists steal. I mean,
Tarantino says it all the time, and he does it all the time.
I love Brian De Palma. There would be no Brian De Palma films without Hitchcock. I mean,
sure. Yeah.
It's always direct references, but also in a visual style that De Palma made uniquely his own, with the split screens and the tracking shots and the uptick of even more sex and violence. So
yeah, I mean, De Palma's masterpiece is Vertigo, right? Femme Fatale, which is, I mean, the best movie he's ever made. Anyone who says it differently, God love you, but you are so fucking crazy wrong. Like, but whatever. But anyway, Femme Fatale is like one of the best movies ever made. His masterpiece. He'll never do any better. And it's just like him being like Vertigo, but like plus 10. What do we think? And it's like, you love it. It's so good. Yeah.
To go back on what you're saying, there's a movie called Pistol Opera, and I haven't seen it. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, apparently I haven't seen it either, so I'm just as guilty as you are. But
there's also a movie called Pistol Whipped, I believe, starring Steven Seagal, that I'm sure you also haven't seen, Kevin.
I think my brother might own that in the basement downstairs.
Go get it. Go get it.
That's where it belongs, yeah. Oh my goodness, in the basement. Ghost Dog's friend Raymond is also a Jarmusch staple. He's in Night on Earth, Coffee and Cigarettes, and Limits of Control. He's actually the lead in Limits of Control. Eventually, Ghost Dog invades Vargo's mansion and kills almost everybody, single-handedly sparing only Louis and Vargo's daughter. That night, Ghost Dog kills Sonny at his home by shooting him through the pipe. We have to talk about this for, 3 hours.
Kill. That's like, now, I have seen Branded to Kill, which people have cited that movie, I think, as an influence on this, because it's also about assassins. And I think that sync bit where he shoots him through the pipes, that's taken directly from Branded to Kill.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting.
Well, no, interesting. I've seen Branded to Kill. I watched it in a class last year, and that movie's way sweatier and more graphic, like both in terms of sex and violence, and like just like kind of like a more paranoid atmosphere. So I guess like it's like, kind of like pulling from like that's just Jarmusch paying like a little bit of like lip service to that movie. But like his tone is very different from that one Suzuki film. I just thought that was interesting.
You know what's funny? You know what I kept thinking about? We've been lucky enough to have Alessandro Nivola on our podcast a couple times. He's a great guy. He's in You Were Never Really Here.
Also,
which obviously,
Hitman movie.
existential hitman, good movie. Yeah. Kind of the polar opposite of this movie, but similar in structure, but like speaks to the filmmakers making it, where like Lynn Ramsey's kind of tends to come at things like, how terrible is the world? Let me show you how to, right? Like it's very kind of like, let me dive into the darkness of your soul and show you how dark we can get, what have you. And Jarmusch, obviously, it's a bit more playful, a bit more optimistic, even when he's dark, right? There is like a hope to what's maybe still lingering, in our hearts, whatever, right? So these are different movies by different filmmakers, but it's interesting to watch it because it's like there are aesthetic, marginal similarities. The performances are very kind of quietly intense, but in like the way that like Forrest Whitaker is so much different from Joaquin Phoenix. So that's just interesting movie to bring up as as we talk about Ghost Dog. That's another kind of worthwhile hitman movie. Yeah.
Love that movie. Yeah. I forgot to mention, but the mob guys try and go and kill Ghost Dog, but Gary Farmer's there. They shoot at him, and then they're like, I thought he was a black guy. And then it's just showing the incompetence of the mob, and they go back another day and shoot somebody else's there who's not Ghost Dog, but it is a black guy. So they were like, close enough, I guess. So
this was his narrative follow-up to Dead Man, right? Because it very much feels like, not an Easter egg. What's the term I'm looking for? Like it very much feel. I mean, in many ways, it's about the same themes as Dead Man. Although it's been a while since I've seen Dead Man. I know that Dan, you think that's a masterpiece. I would agree. It's just been so long since I've seen it, but wouldn't you say it also deals with similar themes in terms of like culture and basically white people being fucking stupid?
Yeah, I mean, it basically takes the Western mythic and kind of, turns it around and spanks it type of thing. It's like very much kind of like, can you believe this bullshit? Right? Like, and I think people always talk about Unforgiven. It's a way more direct, anti-Western, fine, great movie. But I think to a larger degree, what Jarmusch is doing in Dead Man is quite... Yeah, it's more interesting, right? It's like there's more happening. Yeah, I mean, obviously, big recommend. And I think you're kind of right, Charlie, right? Like, the Ghost Dog almost feels... in a way, in it like an addendum, right? Where like Jarmusch is like, I have more to say, a little bit. Yeah.
I think this is before he goes into the house and kills everybody. He finds Louis, and Louis informs him that they're gonna kill Ghost Dog for killing Frank. A guy rolls up on Louis and tries to kill Louis. Ghost Dog kills Louis. Or doesn't kill Louis, kills the man that's trying to kill Louis, and then shoots Louis in the shoulder. And then when he goes to the house again,
exact same place as last time.
And then he goes to the house and he shoots him in the shoulder again. He comes home to see his place has been ramshackled, all the birds are dead, etc. I found it was funny is that everybody watches something in this movie pretty much, and it's all old cartoons.
Yeah. What are your guys' take on that? I have a couple of reads on why they're watching cartoons all the time, but
can I tell you the weirdest freaking thing in the world though, real quick?
Please, absolutely.
So the one in the middle of the movie where the Grim Reaper is like sizing up Woody the Woodpecker. I swear to God, on Friday night, and I do this sometimes, I just was on archive.com, like public domain, whatever. And I just saw like Woody the Woodpecker, whatever, and I like logged in on Letterboxd. I was like, oh, let me just 7 minutes. Let me just watch an old Woody the Woodpecker. And it's that I watched that cartoon. I was like watching Ghost Dog yesterday, and that shit came up, and I was like, what? I just watched this like 2 days ago. It's great, very fun 7-minute cartoon. But yeah, I think the idea is obviously it's like not enough. Yet another not so subtle kind of universal element to the whole bit, especially at the end where the guns get bigger and they take over the world.
Yeah.
The Itchy and Scratchy stuff, I thought it was interesting they picked the one where Itchy is like blowing up Scratchy's grave, and then he comes out of the grave just on fire as a skeleton, which relates back to the Frankenstein themes. And yeah, as you said, I think they did pick that one where the guns get bigger and then it turns into the whole world, because it is very much talking about culture and cultural appropriation and how these lifestyles, and I mean, let's not beat around the bush. These people, the mob is fucking racist. They are horribly
Holy
racist.
shit, really?
Dog. Did you wait? Where did you see that in this?
I gotta go take my Al Capone
I
poster
think there
down.
were a few epithets thrown around. No, but like I do think that like the Itchy and Scratchy stuff, as much as I love that they reference Itchy and Scratchy, I do think that the guns getting bigger across the whole world. It doesn't like it obviously ties into what it's saying about how white people think that they can have everything under control and can be empathetic to different cultures when really they're not. And when it turns out that they made a mistake, they're going to take out lower class citizens, or in this case, people of minorities of a different race, in order to fix their problems. And they're terrible at it. I mean, we'll get to another plot point, but I think that I don't want to spoil what other plot point comes up later in the film that we haven't gotten to, but I think that's another way in which the film is very much commenting on, like, quote unquote, how white people see people as equals, when in fact that it's very just convenient for them to write them off as equals, and it's not always that. We'll get into it. Sorry.
Bryden, is that the ideas you had about the cartoons being in the movie?
Yeah, I mean, with the Itchy and Scratchy one, I think it's just like sort of showing how like they're like constant like bumbling attempts to like solve their problems with violence is like not that far removed from like the cartoonish killings that they're watching on TV, where like they might, I mean, if they had like the power, they would probably blow up the world if they were just to like solve their like little problems that like they start. But also, I don't know, just like they keep talking throughout the movie about how things like are constantly changing and they aren't the way they used to be, and how like they're all like kind of becoming extinct. And to me, this is maybe a bit of a reach, so if I sound like a dumbass, like forgive me, but like it was interesting like how like it's like they're always watching the TV and like, but they never seem like they're getting any enjoyment out of it. It's like it made me think like, are they trying to reach back into something from their past, like because these are old cartoons they're watching, like some of them, like as in maybe they reaching back to a time in their life when things were promising and that they can no longer get back, just sort of like the innocence of watching a childhood cartoon.
I don't think that's a reach at all, because especially considering the mobster's daughter character, who is intellectual and is the one who lends Rashomon out, and then she's watching these cartoons and is just like zombified by it. Like I don't think that's a reach at all. I think that's very much, kind of what the film is saying, in terms of like, especially in, you could say today too, but also in 1999, like we were kind of being zombified by visual media. And what I kind of love about Jarmusch is he's such a great minimalist visual stylist, and also is very much about, with every single one of his films, telling people to reach out beyond their comfort zone and find something among various cultures that can mean something to them and can change their outlook on life, or just the way they live in general. I think he is a great visual artist, but also is kind of, with every one of his movies, is trying to be like, yeah, but this isn't everything. Like reach, like look harder for anything that gives you meaning. And maybe that's a reach on my part, but
no, honestly, I'm not a huge. I have not seen enough Jarmusch to really like justify this, but just even the ones I've seen, I feel like looking for meaning in life and like sometimes failing, like that seems like kind of like a through line with like a lot of his movies, like Stranger in Paradise. It's like they're just like thinking, well, it's boring here. Why don't I go somewhere else and try to see if like things are more interesting than this place? And then they go there, and it's like nothing to do. What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean the obvious reference, right? Of course, was it's a very Samuel Beckett-y thing happening in a lot of his movies, right? Where it's like waiting for Godot, right? The idea of just kind of like waiting for something to happen. Is it happening here? Is it happening over there? Right? Like, and in that way, the Ghost Dog character is obviously a bit atypical, I suppose, but totally, I think when you talk about these characters, I don't think it's a reach either. Yeah, I think there's obviously a longing, happening, and a nostalgia that's being kind of, and like another thing I love is like they're like their headquarters is that like crappy like the back of the Chinese restaurant. It's just like so like, it's an eye roll. You're like, oh, these guys are done, man.
But they also take advantage.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. No, I'm sorry, Bryden. No. Keep going.
I was just, I love how like they get like bitched out for being 3 months.
The rent, yes.
And then like the guy like turns and like everyone's like was secretly watching, but then they're just like,
right, it's very awkward because they have no money. Right. Yeah.
But like, what does that say that they're taking advantage of like a Chinese restaurant, and then
There
on
you
top
go.
of that, they're using like a man that they claim to have, and you're right to call me out on this, Bryden, that they quote unquote saved, and then use him as a retainer to do the dirty work that they don't want to do. I mean, it's all there. Like it's them consistently being like thinking they're the ones who are in power and being generous, when in fact they're just utilizing whatever it all. And this is what I love about this, is that stuff is not hit you on the head. It's like you kind of have to look for that in terms of what it's saying about culture and race in order to get that. Like I if it was any more heavy-handed, I think it could have been very didactic, but Jarmusch isn't interested in that, which is what makes this film flow so well.
I thought of when the cartoons, everybody's watching the old school cartoons, I, of course, thought of one of my favorite movies, Shame, where he's obviously not watching porn, he's only watching old cartoons. And I always thought of that as like, he legitimately can't watch anything with people because he'll get, like, that's the only way he can break free from it, is just watching old cartoons with no humans in it and stuff like that. So it reminded me of that.
Isn't that the scene where Carrie Mulligan is also trying to talk to him, and he just gets totally aggressive with her, and he's just like, I just need to shut my brain off for like 5 minutes, and obviously he's awful to her, but it's been a minute since I've seen that movie, but I think because I can remember the cartoons kind of being out of focus, and it's like
they're out of focus, but you can like still, it's the one shot, but you can still kind of hear the sound effects from it through the whole thing, just very muted. But amazing scene. But we got just the tiniest bit of plot left, and then we'll wrap it up here. Ghost Dog goes to the park and gives all of Raymond his money to help him stay in the country. Pearline appears and gives Rashomon to Ghost Dog, saying that she liked it. Ghost Dog gives Pearline his copy of Hachikuri and encourages her to read it, but he also says, like, you don't have to read that right now, which is also what he says about a book earlier, I believe. Like, just read it whenever you feel like it. And though Louis feels some loyalty to Ghost Dog, he finally confronts him at the ice cream stand. Ghost Dog is unwilling to attack his master and allows Louis to kill him. His last act is to give Louis the copy of Rashomon and encourages him to read it. Pureline takes Ghost Dog's gun and tries to shoot at Louis, but the gun is empty. Ghost Dog dies peacefully with Raymond and Pureline by his side. Louis gets into a car with Virgo's daughter, who has now replaced her father as the boss. Later, Pureline reads one more time. Haga Curry. Yes. So there it is.
There you go.
Also, RZA shows up and I applauded, so that also happened. I think the scene that you were talking about, Charlie, is the scene where after Ghost Dog cleans out the whole house and he's driving back and he sees the two white people that killed a bear and he's just trying to ask them about it.
You're right.
And eventually they're just like, and he kills both of them.
I was actually thinking about the scene where, I'm forgetting the character's name, but he's been shot based on their previous encounter.
Yes. It's Victor Argo who got shot. It's like,
Victor Argo.
When Victor Argo kills the cop.
Yeah, Victor Argo kills the cop, and then, just like as a reflex, and he's bleeding to death. And
they want equality, right? They
want equality. I made him equal, and then it turns out to be pointless anyway because he fucking dies like seconds later. Yeah, it doesn't even matter. And that was kind of what I was thinking of with that scene. Was like, I like that because you are watching that scene and you're like, oh shit, and that's not something that can go unnoticed, and like. It might be a little heavy-handed in terms of everything else compared to what the movie's saying, but like I did think that was interesting that Jarmusch made a point to be like, this isn't just like it is the first woman who is killed, and she's a cop, and that's how they get away with it. We're like, well, she was a cop, I had to, but it is a man shooting a woman, and it is. it is. I mean, even in which I feel like people weren't even talking about this as explicitly in 1999. Like, I think that's interesting that, you know, Louis is the one who's just kind of like, you just shot a woman, like, come on. And he's just kind of like, yeah, well, she wants to be equal, I made her equal. And it's like, that's not how this works. This is not how, you know, they view Ghost Dog as an equal, and it's not how the world works. But it's easy for white people when they're in moments of distress like this to just write off what they've done as justified, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the 90s, right, you got oh my gosh, Clarence Thomas, Anita Hill, right? So like Anita Hill is early in the 90s, right? The 80s, working woman, baby boom, working girl.
Yeah.
That's all very much a part of the culture. And the backlash is real, and all the things that are kind of reflected in that scene, you know, is all wrapped in it. And, you know, another funny thing, and you can talk about any movie from 2099 in this context, but of course 9/11's the next year, right? So it's like, you know, like you watch a movie like this, and it's funny. It's like, you know, it's that Clinton-y weird, hey, things are good, but are they really that good, right? It's like, that's what it is the thing, right? That the energy is very much that. It's like it's a fake, it's a facade, you know, it's a fake layer on top of a pile of shit type of a thing. And I think this movie, among with many others, but this movie, you know, as good as the best, reflects that lingering doom to some degree, you know, as optimistic as we said it can be, and maybe is in some respects. There's certainly a nihilism to kind of the losing of our way, you know.
And when I said, I realized this might come off bad, but when I said it doesn't matter, I didn't mean, of course it matters that she lost her life. What I meant was he did that in a moment of reflection, of like impulse.
In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter to them.
He's fucking dies.
Yeah,
so
dies,
it didn't even. They try to get away as soon as possible, and then she is dead for literally no reason because they were trying to get him to the hospital, and he was going to fucking die anyway. Right. I guess, sorry, I just wanted to bring that up in case.
No, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
To bring up the Clinton era movies of it all, a movie that we will be covering, of course, my favorite movie, The Blair Witch Project. I always thought it was.
Is that actually your favorite? Is that your favorite movie?
Yes. Funny thing about that, it's just like there's like in the 90s, horror movies didn't really have a, you know, like a kind of like a social thing that it's trying to go for, because like obviously like things were so good and whatnot, but you know, you could obviously tap in and be like, well, are they? Because something like Blair Witch is just like, well, we don't really have anything scary about other people, so we have to be scared of mythic things and stuff like that, where, you know, the main character is saying this is America and it's impossible to be lost in America, and they sing the Star Spangled Banner and stuff like that. So it's just, I don't know. Let's not turn this into a Blair Witch podcast because it will take forever. But
can we turn it into a Book of Shadows podcast?
Absolutely, because we will be covering that.
Yeah. Also Artisan, right?
Yes, I have seen that movie way too many times to count, and I am slightly embarrassed of that. But I don't know. Final thoughts. We didn't really give our initial thoughts, but I know we're all positive on it.
Yeah.
Just final thoughts on it, Charlie.
I mean, I love this movie, but I'm also very much in the Jarmusch tank. I mean, it's almost hard for me to be objective when I love so much of his work. Like, I went in being like, I love this movie. I know I love this movie, and just found even more to get out of it than I did 7 years ago. I mean, I think one other thing I did want to touch upon in light of recent events, it was kind of chilling for me towards the end, where Louis does kill Ghost Dog and the two people of color are just kind of silently watching and don't even try to interfere, and he keeps pointing the gun at them. Like, I found that to be like, even if it really struck me as kind of like a, like, they don't even, like, the most that Raymond does is just say in French, so of course he can't understand them. His gun is like empty, like it doesn't even have bullets in it. Right. And it's been a minute since I've seen this movie, but in light of all the current events, that ending I found very chilling.
Well, but isn't it interesting? Like, Isaac de Bancale, like, is like, what's crazy though is what I'm thinking in that scene is, I can't believe he didn't shoot him, right? Which speaks to what you're talking about, which is
exactly.
You're so scared he's going to just pull the trigger because of these exact, what we're seeing currently and what we've obviously been seeing for forever, but now with, the preponderance of, of cell phones and social media and whatnot, we see it in a more brutal, honest light. To watch a movie from 21 years ago and be like, so thankful that, they, come away unscathed like that, that young girl, my God,
who's likely, she's going to have to deal with witnessing that for the rest of her life.
Sure.
Well,
she'll be in the Bernie Mac show, so it's like, she'll be all right.
But yeah, I just love it as a genre piece, but also as a Jarmusch film, and also just it. I think some people might write this off as because I do believe it's his most accessible film, and I feel like people might dock it points for that. But I love that it so unapologetically ties into the themes that he's always been exploring,
right?
And I think that it is a film that, again, I didn't even take notes for this one because I just love being in this world so much. And I think that's what Jarmusch is so great in. It's just immersing you in these characters' mindsets, and it feels comforting in a way. As cool as this movie is, and as I'd say it's probably his most violent film, even though it's not gratuitously violent ever. It's
I don't know. The dead don't die, man.
Keep blocking that movie out. I love you, Jarmusch, but maybe I'll come back to that film one day and have a different mindset.
Would that be his most accessible?
Yeah, in a way.
It did play at multiplexes,
in a way.
Yeah, maybe.
But
that's not the one that you start out with, even if it's the accessible one.
Only Lovers is very accessible.
That's true.
My mom, who and admittedly, my mom is a movie fan, but
your mom rules. I just want you to know.
Thank you, appreciate that. She loves Only Lovers, and I always think that's an interesting litmus test of she probably has a little bit more of a deeper palate than most moms, I guess. But she, is still somebody who, you know what I mean, not being pejorative at all, but she likes what a lot of people like. So I always think when a movie like Only Lovers slips through and she loves it and is excited about it, I'm like, oh, well, that's nice. That means something.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I got my dad to watch Only Lovers, and he loved that movie too. I guess I mean accessible in terms of the mainstream. This film does have a plot, whereas Only Lovers Left Alive is kind of a hangout movie. I feel like ultimately most people who have seen a movie before can be I know what the plot of this thing is. And
right, it's an action movie, right? It's an action movie.
It's an action movie, and of course that's not important, and that's kind of what I love about this movie is the action is cool, but it's also so much more introspective than that. And but I've been hogging for a while. Final thoughts from other people, please.
Bride and go.
Yeah, I really like this one a lot. I love how it is a very funny movie, and how it's demystifying all of these groups of people and these character tropes that we've seen before. But then there is sort of a melancholy that kind of runs throughout the whole movie about people just sort of their lives are built on these things that aren't really worth believing in, or the good times, if there ever were any, have now gone. But I also love that there is there is so much detail and warmth in the film too. I love how there's shots where characters are just going up to their apartments and you can see kids are skateboarding in the background, or all the scenes with Isaac de Boncolet, who I feel we only touched upon that relationship with the Ice Cream Man very briefly, but I love just there's so much warmth and humor in de Boncolet's performance. Just the way
he's so good. Isaac de Boncolet is a great actor. He's he's one of those guys. He could not move, and Limits of Control kind of speaks to this. He could literally just be, and you'd be pretty interesting,
he rules a Night on Earth.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and Whitaker on the in one of the Criterion Channel specials, maybe it was from like the original DVD release, he talks about how much like DeBoncolet made him want to like, step up his game as an actor, like saying, I gotta like, and like you think sometimes you hear those in interviews and you think like, maybe they're just like speaking, but then like on the Criterion Channel, there's like I didn't get to watch it unfortunately, but there is like a Zoom meeting where it is Whitaker and DeBoncolet being interviewed together. It's like, oh, they really do like they must really like each other. So
right. Yeah, that's cool.
Hell yeah. Final thoughts from me. I do like it. It's not top Jarmusch for me, but I really do like it. I like the RZA influence of it all. But yeah, I just really liked the ending a lot this time, where it's really a show, kind of like it's no way to not sound pretentious saying this, but it's like the brain versus the brawn, because he dies recommending literature and the other guy runs away with a gun that he, it really kind of struck me this time. And then of course the itchy and scratchy of it all, which we will talk about with Panic because of Tracy Ullman. But yeah, I'm a big fan. Jarmusch has only led me wrong maybe twice. So I'm a really big fan of him.
Wait, what's the second one?
The Dead Don't Die and Limits of Control.
I need to see Limits of Control. I feel like that's a very divisive one. I feel like people either love it or hate it.
Isn't that one also about Hitman?
He's a hitman, yeah.
Interesting. Very curious to see how it compares to Ghost Dog when I get around to that one. Yeah.
I think that was my last Jarmusch that I watched, because I was just like, I've heard this is his worst one, so I'll get to it. But
it's his most. I mean, from what I've seen, it's certainly his most challenging film. Right? You got to really lock in and kind of decide how deep you want to go with it.
Yeah. Some people I know think that's his best, and some people think that's his worst. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's that type of movie, right? It's like, it's like. I'm trying to think of another filmmaker, like Eyes Wide Shut's my favorite movie ever, right? Like
that's my favorite Kubrick, so yeah.
But like a lot of people, I mean, it's aged gracefully, obviously, but like a lot of people would say, if they maybe haven't revisited it, that it's his kind of, the embarrassment that ended his career, right? So it's a similar, right? Like that's how it was received at the time and whatnot.
I even had screenwriting teachers who would tell me that film was an embarrassment 10 years ago, and I never understood it.
Jesus Christ, I've never had that opinion. I mean, I watched it.
When I watched it the first time, I did hate it, but I was 12. I don't,
right.
Like, I don't know. I go, now it's, there's literally, I've never seen anything as good as that movie. So it's, things change.
That's a top four.
Very tangential. I'll try to make this as brief as possible, but I remember being a kid and going to a Blockbuster, and me and my sister picked something out immediately, and then my dad went in, my mom stayed in the car. And my dad was like, they didn't have anything. So I just picked Eyes Wide Shut. And then I asked them what it was. And they were like, we hated it. And I'm kind of like, well, of course, you two love each other.
Oh, yeah, interesting. Yeah, that's funny.
Where I'm just like, yeah, if any married couple who's been like my parents are wonderful and have always worked together, I'm like, yeah, of course this made you uncomfortable.
Right, you wouldn't get it.
Man.
Yeah.
A good segue, I will say, that we haven't really mentioned is both of these movies, great child performances.
Yes.
Very rare.
Yes.
Very rare. Very rare.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Almost Major. Please rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes. Please follow the pod on Twitter at Almost Major to keep up to date with what movies we will be covering in the future. Myself, I can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at Kev Bonesy. Bryden can be found on Twitter at Bryden Doyle and on Letterboxd at J Doyle. Charlie can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at CT Nash 91. Our guest Dan Mecca can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at DJ Mecca. He hosts the B-Side of Film Stage Podcast and also Fathom, an anthology series of short stories, both of which I recommend. Once again, thank you for listening.